We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.
Good morning and welcome to the November 14th edition of the Monday Mashup. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'm your host, and I will be with you for the next 56 minutes and 15 seconds. It was an interesting weekend, no doubt, for many folks, especially if you are occupying some form of public land somewhere. You probably were abruptly awoken at some point in the pre-dawn hours by people demanding that you go elsewhere. If you haven't noticed, the Occupy Wall Street encampments from Portland to Denver to Oakland were synchronistically shut down probably right around the same time. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. It wasn't just happenstance. It wasn't just that they all sort of got the urge to shut them down all simultaneously, independently. No, this was it was a concerted and networked decision in order to show a unified front. And here's the whole Occupy movement is really, it's challenging on some level, right? Here's the challenging piece. Everybody knows that there is a huge imbalance in resources, and in not just resources, but access to ways in which power and wealth are created, stolen, moved, you name it. There are numerous acts of egregious and blatant abuse in those areas. Nobody can deny that. And at the same time, the challenge around something along the Occupy movement is to work with the energy that is constructive, that is not destructive, that is not polarizing. And I think to some extent, when the Occupy movement decided that it was not going to have a list of demands at the beginning, that was what they were trying to do. They were trying to keep this as open-ended and non-polarizing as possible. And at the same time, they were also accused of being wishy-washy, on the fence, not really standing for anything. It was kind of a no-win situation. Now, on the other hand, it has served to get a lot of publicity. No matter where this thing goes, it's generated a lot of publicity and a lot of momentum for certain groups. For instance, a group by the name of Answer America. Let me see if I can find this email that was sent to me. This was sent to me, Answer LA. Answer LA. I was sent this email. I don't know how I was sent it. Somebody decided that I was either worthy of having this sent to me, or I'm part of an email list with another group that have been shared. But this is what I got in my inbox today. This is Answer Los Angeles, Act Now, Stop War, and End Racism. So this is the November 19th Social Regional Socialism Conference in Los Angeles. This is on the 19th of November at Los Angeles City College in the Chemistry Building, Room 3. And it's on the Metro Red Line stop, just in case you're in LA and you don't want to support the petrochemical establishment and fascistic ecnoarchy. I just made up a word. So this is what the organizers of this event say. Tired of war, racism, unemployment, and Wall Street. It's time to occupy, organize, and rise up. If you believe a better, more just world is possible, come to the November 19th Socialism Conference in Los Angeles, hosted by Answer Coalition member group, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. The conference will bring together people from all backgrounds, activists who are all who are interested in deepening the growing fight back struggle in the United States. The conference will feature speakers, panels, organizing strategy sessions, entertainment, and discussion. Whether you want to organize against war, racism, sexism, and capitalist exploitation, or if you just want to learn what socialism is all about, the May 21 New Socialism Conference has something for you. So here is and this is a very well organized, very nicely looking email. They're very entrenched here with social media, Facebook, Twitter, forward. They've got all their buttons lined up. So this is what we're seeing now. We're seeing the emergence of socialism, or a socialistic momentum coming out of the Occupy movement. And what's interesting about this is that certainly the socialists were not hanging around the Tea Party events that were going on 2 years ago, when the Tea Party was really, kicking up a dust storm about a year and a half ago. So, essentially, the predators are coming out, and the socialist left are, in my estimation, not just predatory, but they have a lot more in common with the current administration than a lot of people would like to acknowledge. What we've seen since 2008, really, and 2008 was in my estimation the collapse of America. When we had the huge economic crisis and TARP and all the other pieces that fell, the dominoes that fell after 2008, what we saw was the rise of the corporocratic state, which is the beast of socialism and capitalism and fascism all kind of intertwined together into one organizing principle. And we've been living with the reverberations of that since then. And in my estimation, the election of Barack Obama has gone towards the momentum of that movement. And we've been living in the aftermath of the economic collapse ever since. And so now what we're seeing is we're beginning to see this populist, this quote-unquote populist movement come to the surface. And it's not really, I don't think it's necessarily a populist movement. I think it's a movement that's been, it's almost like a sleeper cell in some ways that's been lying in wait. And look, I have no problem with people having a just and fair relationship to the resources of the planet. Don't get me wrong, I think that that's important. And I'm not sitting here behind this computer screen talking to you and being an advocate for Keynesian slash and burn capitalism, because obviously that has not worked. well, it's worked, but it hasn't worked for you and me. And maybe it worked for you and me up to a point, but we got to the end of the cycle, and we're at the end of the cycle now. So it's no longer going to work. And every time, again, and I stress this in my blog, in my latest post about the Penn State scandal and the occurrence of all the Leo sinks, is that we're at the end of an age. We are at the end of a particular economic, socio-political economic age. And whenever we get to the end of an age, we have the quote-unquote new age has to be inserted. And the thing that is the bridge between the old age and the new age is war, is global conflict. And it is a massive economic, a seismic shift in the economy. And that's what we're staring down with what's happening. Again, if you go back and you look at, and I was talking with a friend about this over the weekend, if you look at what happened with World War I think World War I is like probably the most important war, maybe even more important than World War II in the 20th century. And here's how World War I shakes down. World War I takes place just as the Industrial Revolution is starting to take hold, right? We're talking turn of the century. There are factories in Europe, and Europe had a leg up on factories. The United States came to the factory party later in the 20th century, say mostly the 20s and the 30s. The 20s, 30s, and 40s is when the bulk of the manufacturing took place in the United States. But prior to that, the factories in Europe were forging products from the late 19th century into the early 20th century. Now, what they had is they had the machinery to produce, but they didn't have the social capital for people to buy in large numbers. Because even in Europe at that time, there was a concentration of wealth, old European money and monarchies, and then you had a very, very slim middle class, and you have kind of a lower working sort of middle class, although that was changing in Germany. Germany was acquiring a lot of wealth during the turn of the century because Germany had not only factories, they also had large amounts of land. Prussia, Bavaria area that we know, Austria, what we know as Poland, it was all, sort of intertwined in the Germanic Empire. But what happened was that they needed to put those factories to work. They needed to produce lots of goods because that was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, really. And so, how could they do that? Well, they could do that via war. They could create a lot of tanks, a lot of cannons, mortars, all that stuff that was used in World War II. Now, how were they going to pay for that? Well, they're going to charge. They're going to charge the public. They were going to get into the public trust. And they did that in 1913 via the Federal Reserve Act and taxing this country. And then once that happened, then what's his name? I'm spacing on his name. It's not Woodrow Wilson, although Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson got us into World War I. And now the factories are humming, they're pumping, they get to create the war machinery, and that is really sort of the birth of the new age at that time, right? That version of the new age. It's no coincidence that people like Ani Besant and H.G. Wells and George Bernard Shaw, all part of the Fabian Society, were very locked in at that time. That was right around the time that they were trying to find, Krishnamurti and his brother, and the Theosophists were getting ready to launch their quote unquote new age, or the golden age of man. It's all happening right around then. Okay, so then what we have the birth of this new age, which is an industrial age. And then out of that comes the League of Nations, which theoretically was going to be the new world order, for lack of a better term. That didn't necessarily work.